Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Obligation of Memory podcast. I'm Jeffrey Geisner, founder of the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance Group on Facebook and YouTube. I am honored to have today Jackie Gmach with us. She is a life force. Jackie is an American Jewish woman devoted to the furthering of Jewish culture, promoting education, documentation of the Sephardic history, and presentation and artistic achievements of the people victimized by the Holocaust. And that isn't at an inch of depth as to what Jackie has in store for us over the next few episodes. And so we usually start by connecting the program a little bit to the Shoah. And I know that you don't believe that you're a child survivor of the Shoah, but we'll let our audience decide how to put what box to put you in. But I'd like to start by you talking about you were 2 years old during the start of the war. So why don't you pick it up there? Where were you living, parents, and we'll get into talking about it.
Yes. Let me say first, thank you, and I am honored too. And it's always an interesting step to have to talk to somebody and to a computer and present your life. Okay, that means here we are looking for the little girl. I was born in 1940 as Jacqueline Semha, Nataf. And if you allow me, I would say that Nataf is already a very interesting name. Nataf be'hivrit in Hebrew means a drop falling, drop by drop. That means letaftef. But it is also at the same time a word that you pronounce every morning at your prayer mornings. That means it's almost a biblical word. And it's also the definition of perfume, and it was part of the composition of the perfume used then, even at the time of the Jesus Christ, to himself as an anointment to smell good. Born in 1940, a traditional established family. My father was a dentist, very, very well recognized by the community and very appreciated because he was a tzedakah man. He knew how to make donation. And if we have a chance, I will tell you the reflection on that on his children and his nephews and his family. 1940,
Where are you located?
We are in Tunis, in Avenue de Paris, in an apartment, in a small building, which was one of the best neighborhoods of Tunis, where people of economical stability were living. That means I heard you directing me a little bit towards the story, and the story of me as 40 years old, being playing on the balcony of that building. And I was playing with a nutcracker, a metal nutcracker. You know, those instruments in metal that you clip together to crack the nut, which is in the middle. And being such a little child, I dropped the nutcracker. And it occurred that the nutcracker fell on the head of a German soldier, a German officer, who was walking down the street. I will go back to clarify on that, but my grandmother was aware of it and she noticed it. That means she got very, very concerned. She came and rushed to the balcony and saw me crying because I had lost my nutcracker, my toy, and realized that the man who was just, we were living at the second floor, that means was not too high, was bleeding. He had received a nutcracker on his head. That means she was frightened, like you could imagine by doing the work that you are doing on the Holocaust. And she immediately took me in the apartment, put my mother and my aunt, who were in the house at that time, in hiding, and boom, boom, boom at the door. And as soon as she hears the boom, boom at the door, realizing that and understanding that it was the officer, the German officer, she opened the door immediately, lift me up, holding me by my neck, lift me up, and starting to slam me because she wanted to show her reaction to the soldier. And he was one of those men, and will clarify that, who understood the pain of this little girl and say, please, please, leave her alone. She didn't do it on purpose. Yes, I am bleeding, but it's not too bad. And he left.
So you remember this story as a 4-year-old?
No, I do not remember the story because I was 2 years old. But the story was told and told and told, not only in my family, but and throughout the years, because it was a story of importance to show that we didn't have the extremists, we didn't have those people who wanted to period exterminate the Jews. And it was 1940. That means if that situation had happened in Poland, or had happened in any city or in France, the extermination of the kid that I was, as well as my grandmother, as well as my aunt and mother, will have been immediate.
So that brings me to just tell us a little bit more about the atmosphere that you were living in as a 2-year-old, and what was going on in Tunisia with the German occupation. So when you say it really wasn't like Poland or like other countries, but how was it?
Okay.
I know you were very young, but you must have been told what it was like as well.
Not only told, but I did study all that by working at the Shoah Foundation and being the director of testimonies of Jews from the Arab countries. And some of the interviews were about Jews who were living in Tunis. We had the Germans for a period of 6 months. Okay, they were in the cities. We had labor camp, we have internment camp. I don't think, and I am very careful because I am not a scholar, I'm not an historian, I am an educator of the mind, an educator of the heart, I like to say. That means we were in a sense safe without being safe. The most crucial part of all that is, as we all know, was when Hitler met with the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. And when he met with the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, the discussion was the extermination of all Jews, and not only the Jews of Europe. And unfortunately, I even don't know how to say that. It started in Europe, and the extermination was big in Europe. But then he had the possibility, with a kind of acceptance of the Arab population in the Arab countries, and primarily in North Africa and Libya. But we were not facing the same danger. And if you allow me, I will tell you another story of what I call the Holocaust in my family, or the difficult time in my family. Was probably 2 or 3 months after I dropped this nutcracker on the head of this officer. It was a Saturday. We were a traditional family, as I say, And my father was at his office. He was, as I say, also a dentist, un chirurgien dentiste, as we say. And he was in his office just cleaning up Saturday afternoon after our family lunch, and was just wearing his short, a little t-shirt, and he was barefoot, I think, if I remember well. And suddenly a knock at the door of his office. And he said, what's happening? And he was convinced that it was my mother coming to visit him. He opened the door and he faces immediately two German officers. One of them had his cheek basically with very swollen, and my father realized that, and he said, can I help you? And all that was in a kind of English. Can I help you? And one of the officers says, yes, my friend is not well. He needs the help of a dentist. We saw your name downstairs. And my father said, look, I'm not working today. Of course, he couldn't say, it's Shabbat, I cannot work today, identifying himself directly as a Jewish man. And the guy says, you have to take care of him. And he said, but you know, this man takes his gun and put it on his head. And my father said, okay, why don't you come in? He come in, he consults, he observes the problem in the mouth of the man who was sick, and says, you know, we have to extract the tooth. How do you feel about that? He said, whatever you need to do, doctor, you do. And my father starts his questions and learn from the man that it was hemophiliac. Hemophiliac, that means you withdraw the tooth, you can have an hemorrhage and you can lose blood. And my father is concerned. He doesn't know what to do. Do we take the risk? But he has the gun at the same time. What do we do in such a situation? And miraculously, the phone rings. And he picks up the phone, and it was my grandmother, who was not an educated person. We didn't speak French, didn't speak English, but just spoke Arabic. In fact, Judeo-Arabic. And my father said, look, I cannot talk to you just now. I am busy. I have somebody here. He said, what do you mean? What do you mean, son? You know, the power of a mother, a Sephardic mother over her son, even if then my father was probably 35, 36, 37, I don't know. And he said, don't worry. Why don't you call little Ahmed? We always had a little boy, Muslim, that we treated with a lot of respect, but was working for my dad and was doing some errands. He says, send him to the shuk, get a little bird, and when he comes back, you just tear off the fur of the, not the fur, how do you say that?
Feathers.
The feathers of the bird, and you cut off the leg, you take the muscle of that leg and you put it on the opening of the gum as soon as you remove the tooth. And you will not have an hemorrhage. There is nothing, everything will be great. And my father said, Mom, you know, and she said, do what I say. And my father does that. He sent the little Ahmed, go to the shuk, bring the bird, remove the tooth and no hemorrhage. Wait for 10, 15 minutes with his patients, and the two men leave with no problem. And here the fear was bigger, because after that, my father and my family went into hiding for at least 2 to 3 months because they were concerned. We were living in the same apartment, but we closed the window, we closed the drapes, and we didn't show from the outside any sign of life. That means, is it difficult? Yes. Is it scary? Yes. Is it awful? Yes. But if you take the term of awful in the context of what happened in Europe at that time, it was not awful because it was a way to save a life. And I have told this story because I think it's very important that we realize that I am not a Holocaust survivor. My father is not a Holocaust survivor. As per the definition of Holocaust survivor, as it is used and referred to in Europe, with a sincere reality and honesty, I want to share something that I know and that I have learned. They are basically, as my husband was a hidden child, they were hidden children in Europe, but they were very, very, very little children survivors. It is, and the term Holocaust and versus the term of Shoah, because I work a little bit with the two countries. I work with people who have done a lot of work on, like Serge Klaasfeld. I don't know if you are familiar with this name of Serge Klaasfeld, but I'm sure that most of the people who are listening to are going to know who I am talking about. The language, the linguistic is very important. Holocaust is not the word to be used. Let me put it in a interesting way. The Shoah Foundation, the USC Shoah Foundation, call itself Shoah Foundation, right? But in all the article and all the work which is done throughout the years, they talk about the Holocaust. And the Holocaust is not a good appellation for what happened to the Jews during that. And the acceptance and the concept of it's being killed by the fire. It was a genocide. There's no question about it.
So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about your work for the Shoah Foundation, so that you brought it up now, so we can give it some more nuance and context.
I had the opportunity when working at the GCC to develop a number of Holocaust programs. I was acting as sometimes an assistant to the director of the cultural arts. Sometimes I became, at some other periods, I became the director of the cultural arts. But I developed.
Which JCC are you talking?
Lawrence Family Jewish Community Center in San Diego.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, and when I became also responsible of the Samuel and Rebecca Astor Judaica Library, still at the Lawrence Family Jewish Community Center, those I work more intensely about all those programs. Then I had an opportunity. I had the luck. By working with incredible teams and members of our project, where we developed them, and they were becoming almost international. And I would say one was an exhibit about Anne Frank. One, for example, was an exhibit about survivors, local survivors. We called DAFCA, the survival of a people. And that brought me to Yad Vashem, where I made the presentation of this project. If we have the time, I will describe it. If we don't have the time, DAFCA, the survival of a people, anybody can go to the internet and see what it was. Then went over there and I presented at the international conference of Yad Vashem. I had the opportunity to meet with Stephen Smith, and we became very close friends, who was the executive director of the Shoah Foundation. And one day, he calls me and he say, Jacqueline, I would like to do a new collection with Jews from the Arab countries. And I say, oh, interesting. He say, okay, you got the job. Bye. I say, Stephen, wait. And he hung up. That means suddenly I found myself as the founding director of this new collection that we call MINA, from Middle East, North Africa, testimonies.
And
And it was the,
what year are you talking about? When was this?
I was concerned that you ask me things like that. I would say, oh, easy. It was 2000, probably 2010, something like that. But I could confirm another time.
Okay. So
Yeah.
how many interviews have you conducted?
I did 40 interviews internationally. I did an interview, and I can give you some names to see, because I thought it was very, very important to find witnesses and again, survivors for some of them of Jews from Arab.
The reason I asked you the question to go to talk to the Shoah Foundation, I know your history a little bit, so I don't want to call it a trap, but I want to know how you reconcile interviewing people from Tunisia or from Arab countries when you yourself you are absolutely adamant that you don't consider yourself a survivor, a child survivor from the Shoah, but yet you're interviewing, and you just mentioned survivors that you're interviewing. So how do you reconcile those two positions?
This is a very, very, very good point, and I don't think I needed in any way to reconcile with my witnesses according to where they were coming from. I did interview, for example, Albert Memmi, who is one of our writers, was living in Tunis, had a very, very interesting life, has his book translated in 34 languages. I wanted to take names of people who were going to be recognized and we automatically will be studied, because if you say Albert Memmi, somebody study it, right? We had Armand Abécassis. I just saw a movie on Ukraine fired, and you have this guy who is here and talking, who was from Morocco. It's not easy, but let me give you a little example, which is going to make you smile. Okay, Armand Abécassis is a notable of the life of Morocco. Okay, very, very recognized family. He is a rabbi. He lives in Paris. I interview him in Paris, and he lives in Paris. Okay, let me stop. And oh yeah, that's what I wanted to say. And I interview him in the École Nationale Israélite Orientale in Paris, which is a school of the kind of the Sochnut, and a school where the Jewish identity is of extremely power. That means I interview Armand, he tells his story, Rabbi Abécassis, he tells his story and things like that. And at one point, this man would present the problem that he had with his family, the difficulty of the Jewish community in Morocco during that period, the fact that Morocco was a protectorate with the French government and the government of Vichy. I know all that might be seems a little bit mixed up, but doing it very fast. And Armand Abécassis, at one point, after 45 minutes, starts sobbing. He was probably 72, 73, 74, and he cries like a baby. I say, I'm sorry, Rabbi, are you okay? What happened? And he said, from the beginning of interview, I wanted to tell you something which hurt me terribly. I say, what was that? He said, my mother, to be able to feed us and to be able to buy us a little bit of chocolate, had to sell her jewelry. and he had 3 or 4 siblings. And you know, I understood what he meant. I came back with this interview at the Shoah Foundation. I will tell you, they wanted to kill me. And they were right, but they were wrong. Because our suffering was different. Our family life was different. And the meaning, and I prefer to precise why it is painful for this man, and it was for me. At any Jewish holidays in North Africa, the man has an obligation to buy a piece of jewelry to his wife. It's almost an obligation. You do it. Wealthy, not wealthy, you buy her something. Okay. The chocolate is the pastry of the kid of Tunis or of Morocco. Okay. And for his mother to sell this jewelry, which is the symbol of the family, for a little piece of chocolate to give to his son, who is now 72 years old and cry like a baby. That means we did suffer differently, and the suffering of one human being is his own suffering.
So I think that's a beautiful place to stop. We've just completed our first 30 minutes of interviewing. We're listening to the Obligation of Memory podcast for the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance Group. I'm speaking to Jackie Gmach. It's a terrific storyteller and a life force, and I'm sure everyone in the audience is recognizing that already. We're going to come back in a short period of time with our second part of our interview. Stay tuned. See you soon.